Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Future Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Juliette Lamar, and joining us today is Galia Benartzi. She is so many things. She is a co-founder of two different companies, Liquid EOS and Bancor, and she is also a board member at EOS Alliance. Welcome, Galia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited to hear about all this stuff. Let's go ahead and kick it off with speaking about EOS Alliance. You are a board member there. Give us a little background about what EOS Alliance is and what it's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So the EOS Alliance was announced just recently on August 18th. We are a group whose mandate is to empower EOS for all. EOS is a blockchain that aims to be the first wide-scale adoption user-accessible blockchain and build a thriving ecosystem of decentralized applications, what we call dApps, of token economies, of decentralized exchanges between tokens, and all of the components of a healthy, decentralized economic ecosystem. And the EOS Alliance is a not-for-profit foundation that is aiming to help the EOS community at large really gain clarity about the ecosystem itself, about the technological paradigms that we face and will face in the future, to disseminate education and make sure that the ecosystem is really accessible, widely accessible to all, and to help facilitate the conversation around decision-making now and in the future. As the ecosystem matures, there will inevitably be many things to decide and agree on, and the Alliance aims to help folks really get a clear handle on what is at stake and how to make healthy decisions.
And with the Alliance, it's all about community and really education as well.
Right. I would say also it's all about service and collaboration. An ecosystem has many stakeholders, whether they are token holders, whether they are investors, technologists, application developers, users, end users, regulators, lawyers. Really, everyone plays a different role in an ecosystem, just like everyone in your town and neighborhood plays a different role in kind of the coexistence of your community. And so the idea here really is to be in service of this community as it matures and as it develops, and to provide as much guidance and education as possible, both to existing community members and future community members, because there really is a lot to learn and understand about how an ecosystem like this functions and how it might improve.
Give us a little example of the industry progression. How do we get to this point where we have all these different systems and now there's alliances, and give us a little bit of the industry progression.
Yeah, so like everything in the world, it is emergent, and everything that you see is kind of built on the shoulders of what came before. If we're talking about blockchain specifically, we can start with the first generation blockchain, which was Bitcoin, and the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto that really shared the technological underpinnings of the blockchain with the world. The second generation of blockchain technology is what we call smart contract-enabled blockchains. You can see this predominantly with the Ethereum ecosystem, which allows developers and technologists and eventually also end users to program this decentralized database to make things on top of it. Whereas with Bitcoin, you have Bitcoin, which you can use and is interesting and useful in of its own right. With Ethereum, you can make a variety of applications on top of the decentralized database. And looking now at EOS, we really arrive at the third generation of blockchain ecosystems, which we look at as decentralized and governed blockchain ecosystems. And so one of the trade-offs that we often look at in the blockchain ecosystem as it matures is this kind of spectrum between centralization and decentralization. What EOS aims to do is really create a hybrid model that benefits both from the resistance to abuse of power or to monopolistic behavior of decentralized economies, and also provides users with the kind of protection and support that the average consumer really does need to be a successful user of these technologies. I'll give you an example from kind of everyone's everyday life. Visa is a very centralized company, and you may take issue with how they build or run their company. And on the other hand, most consumers very much enjoy the protection that Visa offers in the time of need, such as your credit card being stolen or fraud on your account. Usually most of those charges are able to be removed. And so the balance between the benefits of decentralization and the benefits of governance and, of course, well-designed governance are what EOS aims to do, and why we believe that EOS will enjoy and continues to aim for very, very wide adoption of these important technologies. One of the, of course, challenges with designing good governance is, defining good governance, then designing it, maintaining it, executing it, allowing it to adapt to changes. And this is exactly where the alliance comes in as an entity that will help the community understand, first of all, how the blockchain is designed to begin with. What is its starting point? What are the proposals currently on the table around its constitution? What was the thinking behind these initial proposals? Where is there room for debate? Where do terms need to be better defined? How can the community vote with their feet? What is the best way to create a voting mechanism that encourages engagement, that encourages, true progress towards where the community wants to see the technology and the ecosystem develop? Again, this is where the Alliance sits as a stakeholder to make sure that folks have as much information as possible, as clearly outlined as possible, so that the community can really lean in, participate, and make healthy decisions.
I love the example of the Visa, because that is something that most people have had to deal with. You see a fraudulent charge, you go back, you say, hey, this isn't me, and it's been remitted. And that's one of the biggest fears, at least, that I have with cryptocurrency is that, once it's gone, and that you have to be your own governance over your accounts, over your security, and offering that. For me, I feel like that trade-off is okay. More governance for a little bit more security. And I know that a lot of people are in different camps when it comes to that, where they don't want that involvement. But you seem to be of the camp where, you think that governance can be done in a proper way, where it doesn't inflict too many laws, where people are still free and decentralized in a certain type of way.
Yeah, I think the main insight for us is that everything is about trade-offs. The only way you can make a good decision about which trade-offs you're willing to accept is if you understand them. If you clearly understand what you lose when you decentralize all the way, what you gain when you centralize different aspects, and vice versa. And that's really where the Alliance hopes to shine, is helping the community understand the various trade-offs, and also having a healthy conversation around those trade-offs. Of course, not everyone will agree on which trade-offs they'd like to see, but the idea is to create a mechanism that allows the community to settle disputes, to make decisions, though you will almost never have unanimous consent around decisions. Just another example from everyday life, we tend to build systems around majority rules, right? That's a concept that we've developed as a society. That's how many elections take place. Perhaps there are better systems. Perhaps there are different different ways that we'd like to see elections or decisions be made within a community. And even that process is something that we should discuss. And so, yes, the thing that never changes is that nothing is perfect. And the idea is to really understand and internalize what you're giving up, what you stand to gain with different models, and to allow the community to really voice their preferences and go from there.
Absolutely. Giving the power to the community members is very important in a space like this. For the Alliance, what do you think the next 3 months to a year look like? What kind of changes are going to be happening in the space, and how do you think EOS Alliance is going to be in there with it?
Yeah, well, the number one thing really that will happen over the next year with the EOS ecosystem is moving from testnet to mainnet, which happened in June, and now moving forward to real usage. That means real apps being developed on the platform, and that means real users using those apps and real transactions or let's call them interactions between tokens, between data, and between these applications. And so that's kind of the big thing that's on the horizon. If you break that down, there are many, many moving pieces. One of the most fascinating ones, I think, is the development or the evolution of the Constitution. As we know from other governance systems, the Constitution tends to be, a real guiding, foundational value proposition. There is a referendum process that is happening. There will be an ongoing debate about what is the best way to evolve the Constitution. The EOS Alliance is already facilitating a series of workshops around Constitution referendums. And again, these are open to the public. They occur in various languages. You can find more info about it on our website. And one of the main objectives with the Constitution referendum workshops is really to get as many community members engaged in the process as possible, even if passively through the sharing of information, so that folks understand what's on the table, what decisions are trying to be made. So the Constitution is very interesting. The worker proposal is very interesting. This is the embedded inflation or the automatic inflation in the system, which is meant to create a shared fund to continuously incentivize developers to be improving the EOS blockchain and the underlying infrastructure. We know from economics that people rarely work on things without an incentive, rarely work to improve things without a monetary incentive if you're talking about economic collaboration. And so to bake into the ecosystem a fund that will essentially allow the community to self-fund improvements is a really, really interesting proposition. Now, it's not without challenge, right? How much should that be in that fund? Who should decide what happens with the funds? What if there's a great plan in place and then it gets abused or usurped, right? So there are a lot of challenges. They're very, very interesting to explore because there's a lot of potential here to really optimize and create a system that works well. So the worker proposal and kind of the inflation sharing within the system will be a really interesting kind of movement to watch. I think that we will be seeing a lot of the block producers. We mentioned Liquid EOS in the introduction. It's the block producer that we founded here over at Bancor. I think that the block producers, as a major stakeholder in the ecosystem, will be undergoing a process of really learning how both best to work together and how to individually contribute to the ecosystem. In case you aren't aware, block producers are constantly voted in by token holders and can constantly be voted out by token holders. And so a very interesting dynamic develops where both on the maybe more challenging side, collusion can happen between token holders, and there can be all kinds of interesting dynamics there. And on the very positive side, folks really need to constantly be earning the support of the community of token holders in order to remain block producers. And so while we're seeing both sides of the spectrum play out, we are certainly seeing block producers start to develop and contribute ecosystem improving tools. Liquid EOS just launched 2 tools like this called Watchdog and Heartbeat. You can learn more about them on our website. Other block producers are creating a shared blacklist to help prevent abuse or to help mitigate security breaches or theft. There are really a tremendous amount of innovations happening among the block producers, and I think that will be very interesting to watch. And then kind of finally, in the dispute resolution space, there's a body called ECAF, the EOS Core Arbitration Forum. Again, an area rife with challenges and opportunities, which is kind of the core dispute resolution body. And I think we'll see a lot of really interesting activity this year, both in how this body will shape up, who is a part of it, how decisions get made, how it really scales to support the scaling of the greater EOS ecosystem, and then also whether additional bodies emerge or are empowered in order to create more decentralization there as well, or additional decentralization. And you can really think of these different groups or stakeholders the way you would think of a judicial, an executive, a legislative branch in a functioning government or functioning societal governance. So you've got ECAF at the judicial, they're in charge of dispute resolution. You've got the BPs that are actually maintaining and operating the network, like an executive branch. And you have a legislative branch, you can call these the token holders, that are constantly empowered to propose and also to vote with their tokens for what they'd like to see develop in the ecosystem. Both the election of the BPs themselves and worker proposals for improvements in the technology or in the greater ecosystem. And so all of these areas, I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of action over the next year. And the hope and the mandate of the EOS Alliance is to really shed light onto each one of these developments, not to necessarily take positions on them, but to really try and illuminate what is at hand, what are the trade-offs that are being debated, what can we kind of best assume will happen if we take different paths, and then really empowering the community to be educated, engaged, and active in their decision making.
Oh, absolutely. So in closing, what is the best place for people to get involved, to start learning, to start being a part of that community for EOS Alliance? And then also, where can people find out more information about your other 2 companies?
Yeah, so EOS Alliance is online at eosalliance.io. Also, just a quick Google of EOS Alliance will get you there as well. And that's kind of home base. You can get to a lot of documentation and information there, and also find your way to the Telegram groups and the weekly call groups, and info on how you can join any of the different working groups that currently building and the ones that will come down the line. Bancor is a decentralized liquidity network. The Bancor protocol allows tokens to be automatically convertible one for the other by using smart contracts instead of matching buyers and sellers in traditional exchanges. We can learn more about Bancor at bancor.network. And Liquid EOS is, like I said, a Bancor-powered block producer. Bancor intends to bring the liquidity network, which is currently an Ethereum-only liquidity network, to the EOS ecosystem as well. And so that's a really exciting development to look forward to as well. And you can learn more about Liquid EOS at liquideos.com.
Julia, thank you so much for coming on Future Tech Podcast and giving us this really wonderful and well-rounded description of EOS Alliance, what you guys are doing, and a nice history. I think the way you laid things out was so easy to follow. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing that knowledge and passion that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it as well.
That is Galia Benartzi. She is the co-founder at Bancor and Liquid EOS and a board member at EOS Alliance. Again, you can find more information about EOS Alliance at eosalliance.io. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been Juliette Lamar with Future Tech Podcast.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.